Guys, we're going to go ahead and get started. We have a very timely topic this hour. AI in game development, AI in games in general. We have a great panel here to talk to us. Everybody please give a hand to Irina, Kayla, and Neil.
Hello. Can you hear me? Is this working? I'm a professional. First time. Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Neil Young. I am not the chairman of Network. I was the chairman of Network Studios a while ago, and I founded Network. My company today is a company called Edenic, and we're committed to, spoiler alert, the future of games due to the applications of AI. And so I'm here today on this amazing panel with these amazing two founders, and we're going to talk a little bit about the arc of the industry. I've spent the last year or so thinking pretty deeply about the implications of AI against the games industry. And I think we're likely to see this roll out over three phases. I think the first phase is probably the practical application of AI against the industry that we see today. The second are a myriad of downstream implications through that application. And then I think lastly, we're going to find ourselves in a pretty optimistic future, potentially a creative renaissance enabled by this technology. And so over the course, I think, of the next few years, 5, maybe 10 years maximally, our industry is going to go through just a degree of change and a degree of disruption that is a little bit hard to fathom. For any of you that spend any time thinking deeply about this, it really begins to make your head spin. And it's not slowing down. It's moving faster. And so we need to kind of think about it and think about it sensibly and address it and engage in it. So anyway, I'm joined today by these two incredible founders, Irina Pereira and Kayla Kamali. And Kayla, why don't you introduce yourself, give us a little bit of sense of how you see the landscape.
Sure, yeah. I'm Kayla Kamali. I'm CEO, co-founder at Lovelace Studio. What we're building is generative AI worlds, so prompt-driven spaces. If you think like Alice in Wonderland, underwater survival, just create thematic worlds that you can sort of dream up at runtime. But before that, I was in robotics, so I come from the industry of perception engineering for autonomous vehicles, actually for third-party logistics fulfillment. Very, very different space, but one overlap with robotics and gaming is that they both use physics engines, and I got very interested in a lot of some of the non-obvious applications of AI that you'll see, that you're starting to see more and more with some of the Unreal systems, like motion matching using Kalman filters, series of other tools and probabilistic models that can actually drive emergent gameplay. So that's what I get really excited about, and ultimately want to build a space that using companions, observation agents, and player stories kind of evolving and growing over time, creating just story systems for players in an interoperable multiplayer space.
And I'm Irina Pereira. I'm the CEO of Unleashed Games and Infinite Realms, and there's a reason for this. With Unleashed Games, we actually set out to create a game called Haven, which we want to be the spiritual successor to a World of Warcraft-style gameplay. I'm a former developer of WoW, worked on Vanilla, Burning Crusade, Wrath of the Lich King, and I love social games. I love living worlds. And unfortunately, we don't make them anymore because they're too damn expensive. So what we did with Haven is that we create a human-centered AI pipeline that allows us to develop content for an MMO in 24 hours. Like, the content needs for an MMO took World of Warcraft to well over $100 million budget. I worked on a game called Kingdoms of Amalur that went bankrupt after spending $133 million just for the content needs alone. And we think that there's an incredible opportunity just in the practicum of leveraging AI to do our laundry. You know, all the boring parts, modeling armor sets for different race models, breaking apart designs so that they can be more modular or be more optimized. And that opened up an entirely new world, because once we realized we could build MMO content so efficiently with AI, we realized that there was a huge opportunity, and we founded Infinite Realms, whose mission is specifically to bring to life our favorite books into living worlds. Imagine science fiction and fantasy novels that you grew up reading being playable. And we're doing it. We can actually leverage AI to break down and build production pipelines that typically take 6 to 12 months. We can cost actual productions, and we can measure them against audiences to determine whether or not there's going to be resonance, all with AI, and in just a couple of hours. It's absolutely mind-boggling what we're capable of by leveraging the tools in non-obvious ways. And that's kind of what I'm excited to share with you all, are the things, the practical ways that we can bring AI to bear to do things that we don't want to do or don't have time or budget to do. And we can literally build worlds with the technology that we couldn't before.
It's cool shit.
Yep.
Cool shit. So let's start there. Let's start with the sort of practical application of AI. You know, we've basically built games exactly the same way, right, for the last 50 years, right? It's like player character, non-player character, map with objects, code equals game. And that sort of formula, that format, is the same for Rogue as it was for Pac-Man, as it was for Mario, as it was for, you know, Grand Theft Auto and Fortnite. But sort of as we've gone through this journey with increased compute and sort of the demands of players, we've gotten to this place where that equation, each variable, is really deep and really complex, takes a lot of people, right? And the output of that equation is something very expensive that takes a very long time, you know, and that often doesn't work. And as an industry, I feel like we've sort of painted ourselves a little bit into a corner. You know, the opportunity feels like AI undoubtedly is going to make just an incredible impact on that equation. It's going to allow fewer people to do more, much more effectively than, you know, than before. And I think one of the questions that I have is like, well, what are the kind of the mental model I have is like Ripley in an exoskeleton, you know, in the dock loader exoskeleton, you know, sort of able to do so much more, right, in that environment than she would if she wasn't wearing that exoskeleton. So when we think about kind of the practical application of AI against the games industry equation that we have today, we probably won't get to talk about what's going to be beyond that. What do we think those exoskeletons actually are?
Well, that's really fun, because I love that that metaphor. But the way I think of AI is as an idea projector, right? When you're on a game team and you come up with an idea, what you don't quite get is the downstream costs, the amount of time, the money, the people that would be necessary. Just because you come up with a cool zone, that doesn't mean like it's not going to just materialize. But we're actually closer than ever to an idea just materializing. I mean, in Kayla's game, you literally can do that with just a prompt. But in our case, we found ways to use AI in our day-to-day work. Like, one of the biggest challenges while going around and pitching is, you know, the pushback from VC of whether or not you have a market. Well, you can actually find that market with AI. It has access to the entire internet. It will tell you exactly the resonance of an idea, tell you specifically what places, what Reddit threads have referred to concepts like this, and give you a nice little cataloging of any time something has been mentioned, and then feed back to you whether or not that matches with what it is that you're building. To give you a more specific example, the inflection point for me was when we were coming up with the art style for Haven. And we had this piece of key art that we absolutely loved. But we couldn't just say that, okay, we're running with this art style, because that's just dumb, because you'll develop an entire game, spend however many millions of dollars, and then if it doesn't resonate with players, you just like lost it. And I mean, conquered. I'm so sorry, but like it didn't resonate for a reason. Why? Because they didn't test it with the market. And at Scopely, we used to do this thing. We would spend like $150,000 to $300,000 and run a concept test. Who here has like run a concept test before for art? All right, cool. So you know what I'm talking about. It takes like 3 to 6 months. You get a whole army of artists to come up with different ideas, different art styles, and then you have to find participants and put these art pieces in front of them and get them to vote and somehow collate all of that data. And with Scopely, we did that for Monopoly Go and for another RPG product that ended up getting canceled. And we didn't want to do it very often because it was really lengthy and it was costly and lengthy, and it would slow down production for the entire team. I did that for our game in a week. I had not ChatGPT, but I had Midjourney take our key art and then blend it in the style of Fortnite, in the style of Skyrim, in the style of World of Warcraft, in the style of Minecraft, Roblox, everything. I put that in front of users. I turned that around and got 1,000 participants to give me their feedback on the art style, and I then got to map that to the demographics so that I could have a fine-tuning definition of the audience that resonated with the art style that we liked.
Right. I mean, if you think about the stack of traditional sort of development from idea, like ideation and prototyping, pre-production, planning, the act of development and production itself. So engineering, art, animation, rigging, lighting, all of that.
We had big teams.
Yeah. Audio. If you then think about QA, customer service, localization.
Don't forget UX.
UX, UI, go-to-market, marketing, like that entire stack has the opportunity to, or we have the opportunity to sort of force multiply our impact at each one of those different levels. And I guess the question that I have is, and maybe Kayla, you can think about this for a second, is as you think through that stack on the product that you're building, have you seen a real tangible benefit of AI in terms of how you're building your product? Like, do those exoskeletons that I sort of imagined there, it sounds like they exist for you. Do they exist for you, or is your exoskeleton the user?
Yeah, so our exoskeleton is oriented a bit towards the consumer space, but of course we're using a lot of these tools to save on the cost side. I mean, we're an indie company. We're pre-seed funded, so we want to work with partners. Let's take audio for example. Infinite Album. They have artists who submit their discography. They train on that. They can create like infinitely streaming new sounds and songs. They can create ambient like emotions, and like depending on your sentiment can adjust to that. So that allows at the end on the player side as well this like immersive experience, and on our side an incredible opportunity to introduce really complex and unique sounds that would otherwise cost us a ton of money. As we grow, we want to have runtime asset generation. So we're using a preset like library of assets through Cinti, if anybody knows them, but we want to eventually be able to let players sort of prompt generate their own spaces. And so you can partner with companies like Sloyd that generates the polys. They think they use like a parametric base engine to algorithmically quite computationally effectively generate, if I want a chair, you can get that in with like collision meshes and everything. And then you could get another partner who gets the UV wraps, like textures on top of that, all for, if like on the UG side, if a player's paying $5 for the asset, from us it would cost 50 cents. So it's like a huge margin, monetization margin opportunity as well. So and on the development side, I use ChatGPT religiously, constantly, all the time, forever. Yeah.
So if you were trying to do what you're doing right now as as founders of game startups, and you were trying to achieve it without that technology, that it wasn't kind of core to what you were doing, do you have a kind of like a sense of the sort of the quantum difference?
For us, just as an example, World of Warcraft took 6 to 7 years. Justin, was that 7 years for it? I think 5, okay.
500 years?
500 years and $100 million. We were able to build at least like within 90% of the experience of World of Warcraft cross-platform for $1 million in 7 months.
Well, that's crazy. I mean, that's crazy. But can I just...
Some of it was we knew what we were building, so
Yeah.
like we can certainly take that into account. But we think that we can develop and build systems at about with 10% of the cost at 90x speed.
Right. So okay, let me just check my math there for a second. So like a 900x improvement.
Yeah, Kayla, you're really good at math.
Did I get
Is
my
that
math
right?
right
Is that
there?
right?
I think so.
Yeah.
Did
Well,
I?
we're
Was it
gonna just
9,000?
accept it. We're rolling with it.
I'm not very good at math.
I mean, that, like, the implications of that for the industry, like if you were to sort of like cast your mind forward, and now maybe we could sort of like think a little bit about some of the downstream implications of this.
The big publishers are in trouble
Well, why do you think that is?
because we're in the middle of a games renaissance. We're just at the beginning of it. We haven't seen it like quite catch its wind, but it's coming. Because right now, the force multiplier of AI is enabling smaller and smaller teams to build way beyond their weight class. And we're going to see, indie studios putting out AAA quality content. Because right now, we have the merits of the budget as well as the ideas. And we used to live in a world where a singular creative director or game director would drive a team of 400 to, execute on a game. Now we can have a small team of 5 or even a singular developer building as if they are a team of 100 plus. It's incredible. And we have now the ability to elevate ideas. This is why I think in the last panel where Ben Cavallo said that there were 19,000 games released on Steam last year and 25,000 are slated to be released now. So the big challenge now is how good is your idea? And now the merits of the idea are the thing that's going to make games win. But there's just more and more of them. And actually that's a beautiful thing. We get to see more ideas come to life.
It is a beautiful thing. The challenge, I think, is how, in a world where you have just from the professional game maker class, let's say 10x the number of games that are being built, and this is before democratization of tools and a new class of people who are being empowered to make games. Before that, just take the professional game maker class and say, okay, now we can do 10x more stuff, right? Like, what happens? How does that play out across the industry? And I love the idea of where we get to, of this sort of creative renaissance where there's just this sort of incredible, or maybe a much more efficient mapping of ideas to audiences. And I love that idea. I'm a huge fan of it. I think it's where we get to. It's the journey from where we are right now to there. Like if I try to imagine 10x the number of games coming through Steam or 10x the number of games coming through the app stores, it's hard for me to kind of believe that those creators are actually going to be able to find their audiences unless something shifts and something changes. And so when you think, this is really a question for both of you, because Kayla, you're probably thinking about this right now for your company. When you think about, especially when you think about, okay, look, we're trying to work towards this candidate for the end of the year, and we want to get it into the hands of people. How do we begin to find those people?
Yeah, I think so. So for the part about the industry saturation, yeah, I think that's it's a pretty serious problem. I think 10 times more games are being published every year since like 2017 on Steam. There's like some massive amount of titles, but there's also the black hole games like Roblox and Minecraft and Fortnite, which like has this huge gravitational pull that keeps the players keeps retention rates super high for long periods of time, which basically is taking away from available leisure time that could be spent discovering other titles. From those platforms, I think there's a lot to learn on the UGC side. So discovering new audiences, discovering new niche spaces. I think we should just naturally look into like what Gen Z and what Gen Alpha are primed for, what like society has what they've kind of like been wired for, which is significantly more data, like streaming and processing data significantly faster, having a lot more, I don't want to say, but kind of like ADD level content. It's just like assume like a lower level of focus over shorter amounts of time, assume like needs high shock value, needs like certain elements, which I think AI is actually really primed for. But you can also like enable players, UGC creators, even those who don't, understand Blender, they don't understand, how, like coding or how to build assets. You can, what we're trying to do is do like a UGC light sort of platform. Is like you can prompt your own worlds. Like you could argue like prompt engineering is like a very well, it's a low barrier way to create something, but you can add parameters, add more variables. It's like, oh, well, I want my world to have floating rocks. I'd like lower gravity because I'm going to add these game elements later on. And ultimately, it's going to stack and build over time. So we're targeting like storytellers, dungeon masters, who also tend to be more amenable and open to AI because dungeon mastering is very difficult. You have to write a lot of stories, and then your players your players like to deviate immediately, and so you want like that improv resource to be able to access that. Sorry if that's a little outside the realm, but
No, that's cool. That's cool. Irina?
Well, we ran into this problem. I think even we had this problem on the WoW team, and we would say these phrases like players don't want to read. And what did we do? We created an entire like decades of products that had required fewer and fewer like attention cycles towards reading from players, and now we've created an audience that doesn't have time or patience for reading. And it's a chicken and egg thing, I think, in terms of like the play patterns that are expected. And I also think that we can't assume what an audience wants. We have the big players making the next sequel, the next Assassin's Creed, GTA 6. I'm sure it'll do really well. A lot of people are very excited about it. Like the sequelitis that Hollywood struggled with, right? And it's affecting games as well. The problem is that our traditional methods for finding audiences are limited and prone to flooding. I mean, even on Netflix, if you're trying to find a television show, like you're spending more time looking for what you want to watch than you are actually watching something. And it's really frustrating. Curation is going to be a very important thing in the future. And also leaning more into community and how community helps build games, I think is the next inflection point. Yeah. Finding the people that all bond around a singular concept, title, world. Like I actually think the next frontier is in the world of IP. And how we can leverage IPs that we've loved for the last 100 years and bring them into this modern technological like marvel that is video games. And it's in those places, by creating places for people to gather, that's how we're going to find the next great title. And then going back to the black hole games, Kayla, that you mentioned, and I'm glad you mentioned that. The expectation of modern players is very different. And we as game developers, we're all adults. We don't get it. And when my kids come to me and like they want to play a game and I suggest like, hey, you want to check out, the new Oblivion remaster? It's really cool. Their immediate response is, no, that's boring. I don't like single player games. Like they are coming up in a world where their expectation of standards is Minecraft. Their UX standards is Roblox. And they're all expecting to be able to play live, like with everybody on tablets in a circle in their room. 96% of children in the United States own like a portable device, and that's their primary gaming device. And we're out here making like the next AAA hyper realistic like 3D title that they don't give a crap about. So how are we thinking about the kids who are our future consumers and building products for them, I think designers, I think creators, and like people who deeply think about what users want and build products for users, they are going to be the drivers of taste in the future, rather than the technology or the people who just happen to have the IP that's been overexploited for the last 3 decades.
Yeah, I think just when you were talking there, I was thinking about, I started in Fleet. Fleet. Anyone here from Fleet or Hook? Yeah, there we go. Started it in the games industry, sort of way back in the day, and moved into the mobile games business in 2008 when I founded this company in Gmoko. At that time, and still today, people would talk about sort of, when do we get to console quality in mobile? And the thought that I kept having at that time was I think you misunderstand the modality. The modality of a mobile game is an activity, right? The modality of a console game is, an experiential game is an experience. And I think we might be mistaking the modality of play that's happening in Roblox, which I think is different than Fortnite, which is different than our console games and our PC experiences. And actually, if you pull really far back from that, that's pretty wonderful, right? Because it says, look, the breadth of things that we're able to do with the medium is continuing to expand. The innovation is actually happening with new modalities. I would argue that in the sort of the experiential side of games, we might be at the least creative time for our industry because of the corner that we've painted ourselves into in terms of economics. And I think the opportunity with AI is to reset some of that, and get us to a place where we can create, incredible experiences for the people who are going to be fans of them. Like there's that Kevin Kelly essay, 1,000 True Fans. And the basic premise is, it only takes 1,000 true fans to support a creator. And it's sort of like the underpinnings of, a Patreon or a Substack conceptually. And so I do think, maybe this is a good kind of transition from sort of the kind of, scary downstream implications into some sort of optimistic futures. I do think that there's an opportunity, whether we actually deliver it or not, an opportunity to kind of create or to manifest the substackification of games, where small teams of people crafting things that they love can be connected to small teams of people, or small audiences of people who really love that work and want to support that work. And that doesn't mean, by the way, just like in Substack, there are some newsletters, that have huge audiences, and there are some that have really small audiences. In YouTube, there are some channels that have small audiences, and there are some channels that have, really, really large audiences. That feels to me like one of the potential optimistic futures that we might kind of be able to get to. When you two think of, if you kind of cast yourselves into the future a little bit, and you try to imagine what great would look like what are some of the things that kind of come to mind? What are some of the things that you all think would be sort of an amazing variation of this future?
You want to go first?
Sure. I think we definitely have an ambitious 10-year vision, so I'll just try to paint that as best I can. So the ultimate goal is that, or the ultimate belief is that the future of social media is going to be in social gaming. I think that there's a trend towards that, and I also believe that there is growing fatigue with the parasocial and the one-sided experiences that you get on the social media side. But in the existing social media communities, there's with most of your community gameplay, it's episodic, or it's discrete game experiences, session based. You're not persisting any of that information. You're persisting assets. You're persisting, like skins and such. But there's not really like story building and community story building like traditional MMOs. I'm curious how you feel about like the how MMOs dominated 20 years ago, but you don't see that as much anymore. And I think just because of the overhead, the overhead requirements, it's only AAA studios that could previously, enable those systems. But I think talking about sub-communities, our world, players generate these realms. There's agentic companions that observe and react to the players. So we're innately building up this sort of ledger, this history of interpersonal, like idiosyncratic qualities of this player, and you can use neural nets, like graph neural nets, to observe and react to the players. Every realm has a hexagon, so if you can imagine like a big, we're not in Web3 or anything, but like a digital real estate space. It's like you're innately connected and linked with other player worlds. You could create these sub-communities, these like factions and spaces, and then from there you could just spawn instance realms to take portals to create like resource warfare experiences. And I think that over time, building up these kinds of social structures and allowing people to have roles, kind of almost going back, this is why survival craft I think is so successful, is like hunter-gatherer tribal societies. 95% of the human brain evolutionarily, like from the times we've been humans, is hunter-gatherer. Like we are only civilized for the last 10,000 years or so. So I think we should remember that. That's why our little lizard brains are wired that way, and that's why it feels good to just like, when we were at PAX East, people would just run around all day, 20 minutes. It's like we're still in like closed beta. We don't have all the mechanics. They're just running around on our realm. So I think I think that there's a new future for these worlds, and it's like I could go into details about like network states if anybody read like Balaji Srinivasan's book, but that's more political, so I'll not talk about that.
Well, to cast my vision into the future, I want to kind of reach into my past, where I spent 7 years playing EverQuest.
Nice.
I can't believe I keep saying that out loud, but I do. EverQuest for me was a home. EverQuest for me was a place where I was a badass. I got to work with high-end guilds and take down dragons and gods. And it was all about our tactics and strategies like that enabled myself and 71 other of my best friends to do it. And we would spend days together. For days, we'd try to take down, like an evil vampire lord and fail over and over and over again. But one of the things that was magical about EverQuest was it didn't matter who I was in person. It didn't matter if I was a male, female, if I was ugly, I was a little bit larger in the past, but I just had a lot of social anxiety. And I found my people online. And as humans, to go back to Kayla's point, we only have civilization because of cooperation and the social structures that we have in place. Working together, is the only way to maintain civilization. So, that's what we set out to do with Unleashed in our title Haven, is we wanted to create a game where people had to cooperate in order to survive a beautiful and dangerous world. Why? Because we wanted to essentially enable all of us to have an equal playing field where we could express our individual talents and use those variations together to be greater than we are alone. That's what makes civilization work. And we can actually use games in the future to enable that sort of behavior again. We can do things like take on dragons and gods. And now with AI, we have the ability to tackle these giant game titles and living worlds in a way that, we haven't been willing to do because Kurt Schilling spent way, way, way too much money and never published anything. Okay, fine. Reckoning was actually really good. If you haven't played it, you should. But the reality is that living worlds are a playground, and great games are more playground than they are Disneyland ride. And WoW, unfortunately, I mean, I played a lot of WoW too, admittedly, not just because I had to, because I was addicted. But WoW was more of a theme park, and we designed it very intentionally that way. And when you went from an exclamation point to exclamation point to exclamation point, and then returned to the question mark when you had to turn in your quest, that was gold when you had to turn it in. You knew exactly where to go. You didn't have to go and talk to anybody else. But EverQuest itself felt like a living world because you actually had to talk to NPCs. You had to explore. You had to go through Kithakor Forest and try not to go at sunset because otherwise you'd get eaten. You know, these things made the world feel alive regardless of your participation, whereas WoW was responsive to your presence. And living worlds are the ones that actually feel compelling. They, instead of, resonating with it, you take up residence. You live there. So, and in these virtual worlds, we can bond with people where we transcend time and space, where people, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon after school in the Pacific time can play with, people who are up till 3 a.m. over in Asia and become best friends. That is incredible. So I see AI enabling these playgrounds and actually bringing people together in new and novel ways. And it's not necessarily about AI specifically. It's about AI as the facilitator of the things that we work together to do.
Yeah, I mean, I 100% buy that we could build, we could have taken that, response there, and that same response. This has vibes of old school game conferences, by the way, in a room underground. It's like CGDC
in the basement.
1993, and I love it. It's great. It's a super cool vibe. But I could imagine, you worked on EverQuest and you worked on World of Warcraft. I worked on Ultima Online, and I could imagine that same speech there being given at that time where we were introducing those products or working on those games. And so I buy that AI will allow us to build those things more effectively, ultimately, maybe not exactly today, but ultimately more effectively, more efficiently. There'll be more of them. I can imagine a world where we get down to kind of those being more perfectly matched with audiences of people. What do you all think the kind of net new experiences might be in the space? And those could be new features that are born out of out of the sort of AI substrate that's sitting sort of inside these things, or they could be completely new game concepts or game frameworks. So what do you guys think?
Yeah, I think that once you introduce observation systems and agents that are monitoring players and determining and exposing certain things how altruistic are you, how curious are you lawful, are you rebellious, certain attributes and traits, people will probably try to meta narrate their own play style. And it'll be really interesting to see, some players will want to play as they are and not mess with it, right? They'll be I really want to know what this is going, what kind of determinations this is going to make about me as a person within my community, within my roles. Whether we get into, actually ranking that and publicly displaying some sort of ranking system for that is another Orwellian question. But I think that people will they'll just basically try to, say, oh, if I build a bunch of relics at the shrine, I'm much more religious. So I have a higher probability of having this this miracle event occur. Just trying to min-max, but min-maxing in a really interesting way where it's more of a probability distribution rather than a certainty in a more linear gameplay system.
I think, Kayla, your game is actually a new modality and new framework only enabled by AI, and that's why it's so cool.
It's all theoretical right now, or a lot of it's theoretical. Yeah.
Well, I mean, but the idea, prompt-driven gameplay and novel experiences that you necessarily wouldn't imagine, but the players have the capability of generating and then sharing with their friends, that's super cool. And I think we're going to see more and more of an exploration in that space. But to me, the future is more social, because I think that in our increasingly isolated world, we need to almost you have to be the change. And I think we're all kind of leaning into this desire to connect with others more. This is one of the reasons why these conferences like this are so powerful, because it all brings us together in community. And AI now enables us to create more beautifully and deeply crafted worlds at increasing scale with smaller and smaller teams to create micro communities that allow people to bond over things that maybe they would not have otherwise gotten to. With Infinite Realms, our primary strategy is to work with science fiction and fantasy authors from the last 40 years to try to bring their IPs forward and their worlds. And I'm focusing specifically on the female authors that I grew up loving that would never, ever see the light of day with the green lighting committees that run major companies right now. Nobody would even care. But you know what? With AI, I can help these women bring their ideas into modern audiences in a way like we could have never even fathomed before, and then create micro communities around people that resonate with that content. And we don't necessarily have to make like super complex mechanics that are unique for that particular title. No, we just need to have like a castle with some cool dragons and like these cool storylines and characters that, these humans generated with their brains, and then we can translate that into a digital medium and make it an interactive experience for more and more people at a rate and at far lower cost, so that there's no pushback from a higher level budget committee that says that's not worth our time. And you can also use AI to help validate whether or not the audience exists, and it actually does. But the power is in finding ways to bring like more niche groups together, and now we have that freedom to, because AI enables it.
Do you just, as you were describing that, I wondered if you could sort of share with the audience, like, what would the process be? Like, just imagine, this is very hard to imagine. Imagine I'm a female science fiction author who has an audience of people, and I've created works that audience just loves. Mm-hmm. But it's not, it's not, everyone doesn't love it. Maybe some people have just not been able to find it because, you go to a bookstore, it's difficult to find things. You can't find things on Kindle. Yeah. It's whatever. Like, so how would you take my world and realize it in this new medium?
Well, actually, quite practically, what we do is we scan in the text of a book, and then we break it down into locations and characters and scenarios, and then break those further down by all the assets necessary, the textures, animations, and objects. And then we break that down further into a node database where there are, string references that then can be backfilled by the AI. And with all of that training data, we can then extrapolate gameplay scenarios that are related to the content. And then we plug that back into our front end, like Zone Stitcher, and have the zone relate to our existing art asset database and say, we need trees and we need rocks and we need grass in order to create this, this forest biome. And then we need a character that then the AI takes the quotes of that particular character, gives it the name of that character. Like literally you just assemble it like it's Legos, piece by piece by piece. And what AI can do is it can take semantic text and break it down into its constructive chunks and reassemble it in new and novel ways. And then once you agentify those individual characters and make sure that they don't do things that like invalidate the human player, because you always need Asimov's like rules of robotics, rule number 1, do no harm to humans, right? You need to, once you agentify those characters, then they become like living residents of the world, and you can have interactions with them, but you also have like the AI knows that they have a priority to engage with the character or with the players and drive questing and have the players engage with like, do this for me, do that for me. It's, great games are phenomenal to-do lists, but they just have a fun context to do them in.
This is probably going to sound like a not particularly well-informed question, but when you read a book, your imagination is the renderer. And so you kind of paint this picture inside your head of, of the world. It's like the book's kind of conjuring up something in your imagination. And my guess is that no matter how effective the author is, everybody's visualization of that world is unique to them. Do you think that when you make that transition from from a book to a sort of an AI realized space, do you think that it's a kind of a two-part question. Do you think that there's any way that gets lost? And then the second part of the question is, if you do, is there any space for the player to bring with them their own kind of interpretation of the world so that everyone has a kind of a unique experience? Or is that just bonkers?
Well, I think there's room for that in specific types of titles, right? But if you're realizing an author's work and that author happens to be alive, like we can for the first time have the author participate in the definition of what that look is so that it's actually more true to the intent. And I think that's more interesting than us saying, like that, Mel Gibson is William Wallace, right? And that though he looks nothing like the real world William Wallace, we cast people into roles that may not necessarily match people's preconceived notion in order to produce movies and television shows. Like, I mean, they did a good job with Game of Thrones, but like, and actually I think Jaime Lannister is better looking on TV than the way that I imagined him. But the reality is that we already do that. We already interpret visually. And part of the way that we relate and resonate with content is actually through art style. That's actually one of the number one factors that will either make or break a game. If you screw that up, you pretty much screw the pooch on the title itself. So like that's where humans get to like craft it, and they get to guide it, and they get to build it into an artistic expression. And I think that's the partnership between AI and humanity to create a greater whole. And again, like there's certainly room for player interpretation, but I think that that's a specific style of game, like Scribblenauts, right? Like you draw your own stuff, and then maybe the game figures it out. But like, Scribblenauts is a lot more possible, and kind of like it was really, really cool when it came out, but now it's just like AI can do that really easily, no big deal. People make AI flash in the pan experiences that do that all the time. It's really then, again, going back to the like the resonance of the idea and the human expression that is going to dictate whether or not something wins or loses.
So we've got only a few more minutes before we're over, and it'd be good if anyone has any questions they can ask. But just before we do that, like could just to close, Kayla, when you think about the sort of like the most optimistic version of the future that you can imagine, born from this moment and for AI in games, what does that look like? And then, Irina, same question for you.
Yeah, great question. I definitely am optimistic about it. I think that there's a realm where your digital identity translates almost as like a simulation into these worlds. Like your actions are so monitored and so tuned in, but the gameplay, the experiences, and the social structures is just like a fourth, fifth order simulacra, and by which I mean in a positive order simulacra. Like it's there's like they say like everything is derivative, and we go through like new levels of iteration. But I think with AI, it's that we're taking a corpus of like tons of people's decks, tons of data to create like generative experiences that emulate human emotion. It's only going to open up more multimodal like opportunities. I think a lot more people are going to be content creators, a lot more people are going to be authors, and then I think social systems are going to feel a lot more meaningful in this postmodern kind of shithole we've been in a few too many decades. Yeah.
Irina.
The most optimistic future I can imagine is where my kids Like when they come up with an idea, they can prototype it in a day and then share it with their friends as easily as they grab, a piece of paper and a crayon, right? Being able to sketch something to fidelity and, express an idea in a way that would have never been imaginable in the past, I think is incredibly powerful because, no matter what some people in the modern world might say, every single person in this room is brilliant. Every single person in this room has incredible ideas that they're only limited by the tools at their disposal to express. And the most positive vision of the future is that you will be able to express it. If you've always wanted to be a writer, to someday write a novel, you can. And then use AI to help you edit it and then turn it around and then publish it and try to get readers. We're going to enable the distribution of ideas in ways never, ever before seen. But we have to remember that AI is the forge, not the fire. You are the fire.
Dun, dun, dun.
In a world.
Anyone have any questions for the panel? Oh, yes. Yeah, I'm going to give you this. Here you go.
Thank you so much for the panel. This was very inspiring, especially those last few words from Irina. I work with agentic systems on the daily, and I know for a fact that these AI systems are not a silver bullet. So how do you both deal with that sort of like hallucinations or something is generated that is not exactly what you wanted, especially in your use case, Irina, where it's like there's like almost like a templatized kind of like generation that you do and then you reskin everything. Like how do you make sure that it is precise and what you want?
That is a great question because we've got a problem in the fact that AI does whatever the hell it wants when you let it go. And in fact, I met a researcher from MIT that built like full agentic systems. He actually went through, I think, speedrun cohort 2, but he like created a mystery scenario that players were supposed to go through with NPCs that were agents that were supposed to help the player get through the mystery, but the agents got bored of the players because the players were taking too long, so the agents just solved the mystery for them. But that's the reality of agents. Like when they do their own thing, like they will have their own decision trees. So you have to back out of like a generative solution for AI, and we have to lean back on tech that has been living in games for like the last 30 years. Like true great AI for games, because games, like we have to realize that games are not necessarily like limitless capabilities. Great games are those that take away options and force you to work with more limited tool sets. And great like AI expression actually comes from procedural tech. Right? I heard the clap, the snapping back there. But procedural generation is AI, and we've been using it for a very long time. And when you blend that with generative AI, whoa, Nelly, it's you get boundaries, you get limits, and we're building walled garden LLMs that are literally designed to just express within the context of a science fiction or fantasy world that knows not to hallucinate because they are only allowed to speak about the things that they know about. But you need procedural like content organization in order to be able to get there.
Okay, we've got 3 minutes. Yeah, time for one more question. Yes. Hey, do you want this? Hey.
Important question about all of this stuff is that the Copyright Office and other legal scholars have said, hey, if something is generated by AI, it's not copyrightable. And so if you have all these things that are machine-generated world and machine-generated characters and machine-generated assets, how does it change your business model or the business models of people who are building on top of these tools when fundamentally what it is that you're creating and selling and who owns what really has to be different in this new world? What can you say about that?
That is actually something that we need to shift in our thinking around AI. I think these highly, like, broadly trained models are an anti-goal. We need to start thinking about new forms of AI models that, like, inherently integrate things like attribution and creating royalty chains back to the originators of the content that the AI was trained off of. And there are specific AI companies out there that are building solutions like this, including one of our partners. Because, like, that's a choice that we as humans can make as to what tech stack we use in order to be able to support the creator and the humans that originate the ideas. And in our model, our content is trained and only expresses what comes from an original creator within the scope of their copyright. And that is an important piece. And then once you get UGC involved and you have a model that leverages attribution, and you might blend multiple worlds, say a couple of characters from one IP and a building from another, and then maybe a boss from another, and then that happens to be in a UGC like mishmash, your model has to be able to say, okay, well, this percentage of the royalty goes to this author, and then to that author, and then to that author. But that's where we want to innovate and to rethink how we approach AI and how we assemble these worlds so that we do keep that original creator at the center and, like, make sure that people are getting the credit where it's due.
It sounds like right now that's a temporal challenge with sort of where we're at in the sort of the development of the AI industry. It's like, really expensive, really time-consuming to train models. Over time, those models, underlying substrate, those models become a commodity, and it's cheaper, easier to use as a baseline that you can then layer in very specific information that is necessary to your domain. So, anyway, can you thank our panelists, please?
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
All right, thank you. Thank you, guys. Great panel. We're going to give a couple minutes to transition the room over. We've got an interesting...